This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program Living Legends collection. This interview was originally conducted in September of 1970 in New York City, New York. The interview was conducted by Mr. Pendleton Woods. The interviewee is Mrs. Harold Mueller, that's Muellar, or Mrs. Susan Mueller. This material was re-recorded on January the 6th, 1986 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
While we were changing the machine, you were telling me a story that I want to get on the air. Would you tell me that?
Well, this is personal. Is that all right?
Yes.
This chatter I'm doing, and you can't turn me off, it always reminds me. You said you knew my brother, Leland Vance, my wonderful brother. Well, he had this perfectly darling boy who was at about this time I'm going to tell you about. He was 5 years old. And they had stopped by to see me. My husband and me one evening and out in the backyard, and he was just having such a good time. And when they got ready to leave, he stood up in the back seat of the car, and as they were going along, he kept making, as kids do, you know, zzz, 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 zzz. And my brother turned around and said, "Hey, guy, cut that out." And little Leland said, "No, can't cut it out. I'm Aunt Nanner." He called me Aunt Nanner. "I'm Aunt Nanner on the radio, and you can't turn Aunt Nanner off." And my brother said, "Oh, boy, does he know his Aunt Nanner."
Let's go back to the book.
Okay.
And, your how-to book. Let's start on the first one. What inspired you to write the first book?
Well, because I had, that book is absolutely a compilation of everything I yacked about on radio all those 15 years. It answers every basic question. It isn't the most modern book in publication, and it didn't get the biggest. It was during the war, and we couldn't do big promotion. But believe me, it's just a good old basic book yet. And in my new book I'm writing now, I'm including those basic things, and then I'm going off into all kinds of angles that we're doing. Basics are like, do you know how to poach an egg? All right, now if you know how to poach an egg, and most people don't, and do it rightly, or soft cook an egg, or hard cook an egg, you can do anything clear on down to souffles and angel food cakes and so forth, because you know the basic. And all eggs, now I shall now preach, all eggs are cooked at low temperature. If an egg is rubbery or hard, a hard-cooked egg, they say, "I boiled it 20 minutes. Well, that's the reason it's hard and it's rubbery. You put an egg into boiling water and turn the heat off. And you let it stay 20 minutes, and you've got the most beautiful, crumbly, delightful egg you ever saw. Nobody does it, hardly. They haven't got time. They have, but they haven't got. So that's basic. If you can broil one piece of bacon so that it's crisp and tender, and that has that beautiful bronzy cast to it, and the real fat's cooked out of it, and you could even eat it with your fingers, you can broil a sirloin steak, don't you see? Well, cooked, yes. Yes, if you cook it too fast, you can get in trouble and pour all the fat off as you cook it. But if that's the basic rule, if you can cook that one piece of bacon, you can broil the finest steak there is, or the tenderest chicken, or anything else, don't you see? That's basic.
How many books have you written?
Well, you see, I haven't written nearly as many as I should. I'm not apologizing, but I'm starting out now, and I'll have three. I have three and ready to go now pretty soon. I had a little cookbook after each cooking school that I wish to goodness I'd done more with it, because they had an awful lot of good things in them. I'll show you that before you leave, because that was a compilation of all the things that I had done for 11 years. There were 11 consecutive cooking schools down home, and there was a little book the Oklahoman published after each one of those, you see. So that would make, if you want to count those, that would make 12 of them. The paper, I did something not very long ago, or about a year ago, I guess it was. They asked to have how many people had all of those books, those cookbooks that Aunt Susan had, the Oklahoman. And they did some kind of promotion. Sid Musser will be able to tell you about that. And they got a tremendous response on it. And they wrote quite a nice article about Aunt Susan. And I don't know your new editor down there, you know, but I knew who he was, and so I put it aside and thought I'd write to him. And then it wasn't very long until there was another article came out, and the caption, the top line on that article was, "Good old Aunt Susan." Then I decided to sue them instead of writing them a letter. So I just got so busy I didn't do it. But I thought that was rather interesting. Don't you think it is?
Yes, it is.
After
You still
20
got your
years.
phone?
No.
You
No.
just saw this.
No, but somebody sent it to me. Somebody, if there's anything comes up, somebody always sends it to me. You know something? This is pitiful, really. Now, I'm just as much, I feel like that's home, and I always say down home any time that it comes up. But you do. There's no two ways about it. When you leave, you leave. And I'm a great hand to close doors when I leave. So I would not, I don't suppose I'd know anybody if I read in the Oklahoman. I'd know anything that was going on anymore, don't you see?
Thinking, we'll want to go back to the cookbooks. Before we talk about Oklahoma, your background and your schooling, I presume, was all in Oklahoma.
Yeah, most of it. My people all came from Tennessee and South Missouri, and I was there a great deal with my grandmother.
Do you feel that your Oklahoma background has been of advantage to you?
Yes, sir, I sure enough do, and I want you to know right now. You know what Harold used to say? I think this ought to be given to the folks back home. But they'd have a big meeting and they'd decide to do so and so and so, and they'd say, they'd go around, each one around the table, you know, what do you think, what do you think, what do you think? Said Harold, well, I'll tell you something, he'd say in that quiet little voice of his. We don't do that out in the United States. And that is literally correct. Oklahoma is grassroots. Oklahoma's where real thinking is done. I don't mean everybody's perfect. I don't mean that at all. But so much more real, honest-to-goodness thinking is done down there than is done. This isn't the United States. New York is definitely not United States. Now, I'm not a New York hater or anything like that. New York's been very good to me. But it has no more the feel of the United States. And Oklahoma does. And another thing, not that this is anything to get excited about, I guess, but our percentage of foreign-born people is so much less there than it is anywhere east, don't you know? That makes for, well, look at Will Rogers. He's typical United States, don't you see? And there isn't anybody like that just grew up here, don't you see? They couldn't. They rub against too many different kinds of people and situations. And I think being from Oklahoma has, and I don't want to forget any of it.
Going back to your cookbook, the second cookbook you're doing is How to Cook Now. What is going to be the difference in How to Cook Now and How to Cook?
Well, I'm going first to emphasize the basics, just as I told you about the bacon and the eggs and so forth, you know. Then, from then, I'm going to prove to them that they can cook any exotic. You see, there's so much more travel now all over the world, and they know so much more about the various kinds of food in the different locales. I'm going to prove to them that the most exotic-sounding thing they ever heard of while they were traveling around the world, they can cook if they know what basics are. And then also, I think it would be nice to have menus that are now our young people, our very young people who are just now getting married, are terribly interested. They want to flame everything. They think if they flame it, that's big stuff, you know. Well, it is nice as far as that's concerned, and it is a nice gesture. Also, they don't want a whole lot of fol-de-rols. They are all fed up on too much menu and too much. For instance, they are not going to spend a whole day making a big dessert. They'll go out and get some fruit, which is a whole lot more sensible. So that's How to Cook Now. I mean, briefly.
Yes. Are you going to tag it sequel to How to Cook? Are you going to tag the book sequel to How to Cook?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that it would.
I don't know whether it would or not.
No, I don't either. And I'm doing a cheese book, and that, incidentally, you are to be flattered because I took the morning off to talk with you. which I'm supposed to get it in this afternoon, and I have to go over and deliver it. This is nothing but cheese. And it is, I never have done anything that's given me any more inspiration, because it is, you can just dig and dig and dig. I wonder if I won't spend the rest of my life on cheese.
How did you get interested in cheese?
Well, there's a man who was on my show. Now, there you are again. I just named the person that was on our show. And Harold used to get in fact, he got all of the guests. And he was a natural-born reporter. And he would just dig up people that nobody else ever thought of. And incidentally, it should know that I was the first television person to have guests on the show and interview them. Of course, that's just the regular now, but I don't suppose they even know when they started.
Who was your first guest? Do you remember that?
Wouldn't that be fun to know? And I don't. That's a good question. I'm going to see if I can figure that out. The man who produced our show is a very close friend of mine yet. He lives out in Montauk, Bob Loy. And we'd get together and reminisce a lot. I'm sure he'd know. Wouldn't that be fun to know? But I had, on the show then, I had every big restaurant owner here, every big maitre d', and out in New Jersey, and out in Long Island, and up in Connecticut. For instance, Treadway Inns is a very famous chain of inns, and beautiful food. And he was senator from Massachusetts, and Harold got him on the show one time, and he was a wonderful guest. That's the kind of guests we had, and this is the kind of... Now, I'm taking a lot of those recipes and putting into the new book.
With the audience you had, it would be a real privilege for a restaurateur particularly to be on.
Well, it was always good. The Chambord was a very, very expensive restaurant. You couldn't go there for less than $50 for a little 2 or 3 people, and a couple, really. And we had them on, and somebody said, "Oh, phooey, that's too expensive for your audience." I said, "You make me tired. I've got the best audience in the world." And do you know that I think it was just about 3 weeks after that, they had, I think it was 14 people come and have an anniversary party there. You can think what that went into, just from that broadcast. So this cheese man was on the show. Harold got him. He's the cheese of all nations. He's really a cheese gourmet. Yes, Phil Alpert is his name. And he was born in Switzerland, and he's been here for many, many years, and he has this wonderful cheese place. And he wanted me to do a cheese book, and I got to researching it, and it's terribly interesting.
Is this on how to prepare cheese?
Well, I just finished this chapter just last night, about 11:30. I had just one chapter on nothing but the entree. You know, in other words, you could have this whole dish for your whole entree. And then I'm going to do, it'll have cocktails and salads, and so 7 scintillating salads is the salad chapter.
I believe you said you had another book.
Yes, I have another one, which is, well, this How to Cook Now is in the mail. And also, I have 30 galas. This is they've all been around the world. Everybody that you know has been around the world, you know. And what did they find? What country would they like to cook as they did there? And I'm going to have a party. And I'm going to do the food, every bit of the food, and how to set the table, and how to dress. And then give them a little, in Spanish, salud y pesetas y tiempo para gustarlos.
Who's publishing your book?
Well, Fawcett is publishing this cheese book, and it's going to be a paperback. I want to make some money on it, see. And on the other one, I don't think I can say yet. It's not authentic. I mean, it's not to be liberated yet.
Really
oh, boy, and I just might, if Fawcett would take the rest of them, and then they pay me enough money, I might just do them all paperbacks. I think a paperback cookbook is just a dilly. Who wants a great, big, expensive cookbook with a lot of trouble in the kitchen? You don't have room for it.
And it gets thumbed through.
That's right, that's right.
Grease on it, and
that's not sour grapes either, because a little book is much handier in the kitchen. I'd rather have a lot of them.
Are there other areas of your career that we have uncovered that you feel might be of particular interest?
Well, I don't, I just think the radio and television is terribly interesting. I think the magazine, McCall's magazine, and, well, after I left the show, our television show, Harold and I went to Connecticut to live for a while, and I tried to retire. I didn't do a bit of good. I just couldn't stand it, and I'm just not ever going to retire. They can carry me out feet first, but I'm going to still be working when they do. But I did then a public relations job, and I promoted mushrooms, and I went all over the country broadcasting the gospel of mushrooms. And actually, we put the company that I was with, I did all the food work, put mushrooms on the map. And I'll tell you something else that I think was an awful nice thing I did. It was terribly interesting. For American Airlines, I did a library of color pictures. They were just gorgeous, bigger than that picture over there, in color. And believe it or not, you might not like some of the food you eat on planes, but they buy the most beautiful food in the world. And I would go into their kitchens and into their storerooms and drag out this gorgeous food, and we made pictures. I went clear from one end of the globe to the other doing that. I flew 82,000 miles that year doing those pictures. And then I did a seminar after we had finished it. After the pictures were all finished and in, I did a seminar down at Dallas, or Fort Worth, down at the, where the college is, the Stewardesses College, and gave a talk on these pictures. And they decided to have 30 of each year, don't you see? And they wanted the girls to know more about food and not just consider themselves waitresses. They were experts, you see, and they were also hostesses. So I gave them quite a little dissertation on that, and then we'd have a beautiful big luncheon. And I think one of the interesting things about that, I was very proud of the pictures because they did a beautiful job in getting them together. I left New York on Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock and got down to Fort Worth and had a little rest. And then the next morning I went to this meeting and gave the talk. And then we had the luncheon. And then I got on a plane at 5 o'clock and came back to New York on Wednesday. This was left here on Tuesday and left on Wednesday. I did that for 13 weeks. And I saw spring come in Dallas with the bluebonnets and the mockingbirds. Oh, I'm going to tell you about a mockingbird, too. And then I saw spring come in New York. I saw 2 springs. Wasn't that kind of interesting? You know what I'd like to have from home more than anything in the world? I'd like to have you go take this tape and go out in the backyard somewhere and get a recording of a mockingbird. I get more homesick for a mockingbird than anything I left down there. We had a mockingbird in our backyard that used to get up on a telephone pole, and his repertoire just made anything you've ever heard look sick. And did you know that a mockingbird mocks 32 different birds? They do. They mock 32 different birds. I would just adore having I'll give you a cassette, and you can take it with you. How's that? Right. On my recorder. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be fun to have? I thought of that the other night. I was kind of, I think, lonely, and sometimes I get kind of lonely, even in New York. Can you beat that? Mm. It's no good. Do you know that all my family's gone? I'm an absolute loner. And it's, you go back to things like a mockingbird.
Mentioning your mushrooms, did you have any audience reaction on your mushrooms?
Oh, yes. I made photographs every month of the most beautiful mushroom things to cook, just make you drool, and that's, of course, what they were supposed to do. Then I wrote a column, and I sent this out. I worked for a public relations man, and a marvelous person. He just let me do whatever I wanted to. That's the reason I think he's marvelous. But it was a good outlet for mushrooms, and I sent this out to every big and many smaller newspapers in the whole United States. I got to know all the food editors, and do you know they picked my stuff up verbatim? Now, I'm proud of that. On the Chicago papers, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, every place that you can think of. I've just got loads of clippings yet. And that put mushrooms on the map. That's what I want to do with cheese now.
You're working on that.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't, where did you go to school?
A&M, at Stillwater. Mm-hmm. It's called Oklahoma College, or what is it now?
Oklahoma State University.
Oklahoma State University. I had a degree in home economics, and believe me, I had 5 years of food chemistry. They don't have but 2 now.
Have you kept contact with Oklahoma State University?
No, I haven't. I'm not a very good. I have a funny little. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's bad. I don't know. But when I leave something, I just don't go back. I've never been back to McCall's, and they were the sweetest things to me, and gave a big party, and everybody was happy, and so on. But I just don't go back.
And now you probably wouldn't know anything.
No, Mercedes comes to see me very often, and she says, "Honey, you wouldn't know Oklahoma City anymore," and it's quite wonderful, the things that she's told me, and I'm sure it has grown so much, and it would be very interesting. Maybe so someday I will come back. I tell you what I thought I'd do. I'd have my face lifted, and get a Dior outfit, and come down and sort of, Oh, I might do that. I'm sure they wouldn't want that.
This has been wonderful, and we have just visited with Mrs. Harold Mueller in New York, who was once known as Aunt Susan to literally thousands of housewives and husbands in Oklahoma. Thank you very much.